The vampires of Vampire the Masquerade, they have magic that they can use, specific disciplines, this is what they call them, that they can train the mind, train the body, train someone else's body. And Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition introduced something called Amalgams. These are disciplines and skills from previous editions of Vampire that just didn't quite fit. But with these new takes on some older skills, we can turn them into, hopefully, something useful. My name's Nathaniel, welcome to the table. This is a channel where I discuss world lore. I've been focusing specifically right now on World of Darkness, as well as things that are in the Paizoverse. If that's something you're interested in, I would love to have you join me at the table. Amalgams are a blend of different disciplines that exist within World of Darkness. They draw on different knowledges and abilities from other disciplines to create their own take on things. If you've played Vampire the Requiem, you would be already familiar with this process, as it was called devotions back then. In order to use amalgams, you must have proficiency in certain disciplines to gain access to these skills. They are often used to create specific powers for specific clans, and in some cases, they can even replace disciplines entirely. Some of you that I've talked to from the disciplines video were not very happy with how the amalgams were handled, but let's talk about them in a high level, and maybe you can decide if this was a good or a bad thing for yourself. The first one we're going to talk about is Chimerstry. Now, I would forgive you for pronouncing it chemistry because that's how I wanted to read it, but that is not how it is actually pronounced. And that's coming from me, someone who is notorious for not pronouncing things correctly. Chimerstry is an amalgam for the Ravnos clan. It's all about illusions, but taking it to another level. It's more than just a visual hallucination, it's also auditory. You hear things, you can feel things on your skin. It is assumed to have been developed by the Ravnos antediluvian. Chimerstry works best when the target doesn't realize that anything is actually happening. Most practitioners of this amalgam don't tell people that they can do it because it would ruin the power of their illusion. Even if you know something is an illusion, it can be very difficult to see through the trick, as it were. Only vampires with high levels of auspics can actually see through this type of amalgam. One drawback to using Chimerstry is the fact that if you're going to create an illusion, you also have to experience it yourself. Even if it's just for a short period of time, the caster, the originator, will experience, see, hear, feel the illusion that they are casting on someone else. So if you're conjuring images of fire, you have to be very careful because as the caster, you can also succumb to rot shrek. And a vampire can only create an illusion for the senses they have control over. For example, if a vampire is blindfolded, they cannot create a visual hallucination. This is because they must experience it themselves. Dementation is an amalgam of our favorite vampires, the Malkavians. In 5th edition, Dementation is no longer its own discipline, it is an amalgam of Dominate and Obfuscate. Dementation gains its power from the vampire's own insanity. They can use it to gain profound insights into something they wouldn't otherwise know, or to inflict madness on someone else. This amalgam is the reason that the Malkavians are so insightful as well as dangerous. It also seems to allow Malkavians only deeper access to the Madness Network. Non-Malkavians can learn to use Dementation, but they do not gain access to the Madness Network. This leads many to believe that this is tied somehow to the Malkavian antediluvian. Now the downside, or maybe the upside to this amalgam, if you don't have a mental derangement, you can't learn it or use it. If you had a mental derangement and it gets cured, you can no longer use any powers of this amalgam until you mentally break again. Unfortunately, users of the Dementation Amalgam, they have the ability to make others crazy around them. You get a contact high from the crazy. Obeah has greatly changed from previous editions. It still belongs to the Salubri, but it is now an amalgam, a blend of different disciplines. It used to be known as Valeren, which was, again, a discipline for the Salubri, but we'll get to that one in a minute, don't you worry. Obeah originated with Saulot and his adventures with the Kwai Jin in the East. The Kuai-Jin use a power called the Dragon Pearl. It's meant to emulate the dragon sages from days of old, and it tends to give you your third eye. And because Obeah has these Dragon Pearl roots, it also gives you a third eye if you tend to use it. The third eye is said to grant the Salubri the ability to see the lines of life and death. Those who followed Obeah, they were able to cleanse the soul of others, remove taint in various forms. They could also restore vitality. However, there was a targeted smear campaign by the Tremere, so instead of being associated with healing and personal cleansing, it was instead associated with infernalism, which wasn't correct. But that's what everybody thinks Obeah is now, thanks to the Tremere. I shouldn't have to say it, but the Salubri, they didn't like that, and they hold a grudge. Serpentis was a discipline for the followers of Set. It provided shape-changing abilities around that of the snake, but it also came with a bit of corruption. In Vampire 5th edition, it has changed to an amalgam. Now known as the Ministry, Serpentis still has significant religious implications to the clan. Some scientists within the Kindred Society, they believe that this amalgam gets its power, its shape-changing abilities from the Protean discipline, but the Setites, the Ministry, they believe that it is a gift from their dark god. And because of this, they almost never share it with any outsiders. This amalgam allows the user to disregard their human form. They can take the shape of snakes, and those who are far enough along this amalgam tend to not stay in their human forms. Now, there are some other added benefits as well. There are certain gifts and skills within this amalgam that allow a vampire to remove important organs, such as a heart. You can't be staked or diablerized if you don't have a heart. When this happens, the organ that is removed grows scales around it and it becomes nearly indestructible. But if it is found by someone who wants to diablerize you, it's much easier to do because the heart is already out of the body. I like this one. I like the idea of this one. I haven't gone too far into the abilities and things that you can actually do mechanically within the game around this, but I have a feeling that I might enjoy it. Now, as promised, Valeren. This one is also a little difficult. This is also an amalgam for the Salubri. In its simplest form, Valeren allows the user to take control over pain they experience within their own body. Very commonly used in warriors of old, it's not that they didn't experience pain, they could just take hold of it and suppress it, thus allowing them to do things that should not have been possible. Now, Valeren was originally split between the path of the healer and the path of the warrior, both Salubri disciplines. Valeren, or the Path of the Warrior, was originally developed by Samiel to fight the Bali. Like Obeah, using Valeren opens the third eye, and it allows the vampire to see the lines of life and death, and any skill that they use aside from one opens the eye into a bright glowing status, so you can't use it very stealthily. Before we talk about Viscisitude, you may have noticed a couple of things have changed, and that is because I'm an idiot. I totally missed this section while I was recording the other 5, and I only noticed it when I was doing editing after I had changed all of my camera settings and my office, as you can see. Damn you, continuity! If you haven't heard of it, Viscisitude is a trademark of the Tzimisce clan, and this is probably one of my favorite abilities. It is unfortunately an amalgam in the 5th edition rather than a specific discipline as it has been in the past. It is definitely one of the most horrifying things a Khainite can run into or be turned into. Basically, an experienced flesh crafter. They can turn your skin, your bone, into anything they want. And when I say this, I do mean anything. You could be turned into the centerpiece of furniture for a Tzimisce living room. The Tzimisce do use this ability on themselves quite a bit. Some of them do this to improve their looks, but beauty is only in the eye of the beholder. For some, this will follow traditional beauty standards, ones that we are familiar with in magazines, but for others, it can come in much more grotesque forms. And if you piss off a Tzimisce, you're definitely going to be turned into something awful. The nature of Viscisitude is unknown. It is widely believed to be associated with the Tzimisce clan antediluvian, but the way it is passed on, the way it is learned, is very different from everything we have talked about thus far. Vicissitude functions almost like a virus. You have to be infected with the blood of someone who already possesses vicissitude skills. It's because of this reason it is believed that the Tzimisce Antediluvian is part of the process. He was part of its origins, if not the origin. And that's because literally he tried to become one with everything, and it didn't really pan out for him. In Vampire 5th edition, Vicissitude is an amalgam. It is not its own discipline as it has been before. It does combine elements from the Protean discipline as well as the Dominate discipline. Now, if you like these amalgams, you're definitely going to like the disciplines, and I have that for you here. Thank you to all of my patrons for supporting me and the channel. All of your support is greatly appreciated. My name's Nathaniel. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.